Welcome to Grades of Green's Adult Learning Series, your free resource to learn more about climate change and how to bring climate action to your community. I'm your host, Jack Magner. In this module, we'll investigate how waste contributes to the climate crisis and what can be done to bring about solutions in your school and your community. By the end of this module, you will be able to identify different kinds of waste and how they contribute to climate change, explain how waste treatment and waste management are environmental issues, and get project-based learning resources to teach about waste on campus. Whether it's liquid, solid, organic, or hazardous waste, humans generate 2.2 billion tons of it every year, and shockingly, that number is expected to rise by up to 70% by 2050. To visualize this, the world's waste could fill nearly 6 billion Olympic-sized swimming pools. When waste isn't handled properly, we run the risk of irreversibly polluting valuable natural resources, endangering precious ecosystems, and worsening public health. Reports estimate that US schools generate 530,000 tons of waste every year, costing $9.7 million a day to manage. Thus, schools are uniquely positioned to address waste sorting issues by utilizing effective materials management practices. By making small procedural changes to campus practices and sorting at the individual and district level, campuses can mitigate their climate impact from food and organic waste. Let's dive a bit deeper now into the problem of waste, starting with environmental justice. Waste is a global problem, but its impacts are felt disproportionately around the world. According to the United Nations, high-income countries represent 16% of the global population, but generate 34% of global waste. And while most of this waste is handled domestically, a significant amount of plastic waste, for example, is offloaded to lower-income countries under the guise of recycling. This practice takes advantage of less strict recycling and waste disposal standards, leaving lower-income communities with disproportionate exposure to the harmful byproducts of other countries' waste. The injustice of waste is also a domestic problem, as lower-income communities are often burdened with closer proximity to waste sites and sources of large industrial pollution. This directly impacts school communities, as low-income, Hispanic, Black, and AIPI students are more likely to be exposed to the harmful byproducts of waste while in the classroom. By learning and understanding how our waste systems work, campuses can make a huge impact through proper disposal, reducing harm to the environment locally and around the globe. Now, it's clear that this waste is a major environmental problem, but where does all this waste come from in the first place? One driver of waste is the rise in overconsumption. Whether it's buying new clothes every week, living in large houses that require significant resources to keep warm and cold, or over-reliance on cars to get to our everyday necessities like grocery stores, pharmacies, and offices, much of how we structure society centers on using more resources than needed. Companies specifically design products that are widely available with a concept called planned obsolescence. In other words, designing the products to become less useful over time, so that consumers have to buy more and more. These products are seemingly cost-effective, but in the long term, users spend more on these products and waste more. This practice is intentionally unsustainable, and as the need to manufacture more stuff of lesser and lesser quality grows over time, the use and demand of fossil fuels continues to warm the atmosphere, damaging local and global environmental quality while wasting precious resources. One example of schools contributing to overconsumption is through utilizing single-use plastics. By limiting single-use lunch items like plastic utensils, disposable lunch trays, and plastic water bottles, schools can better combat the crisis of waste. Other examples include carpooling and taking the bus, coordinating walking and biking to school days, establishing no idle zones during pickup and drop-off, and being mindful about waste when purchasing school supplies. Food and organic waste comprise the largest proportion of matter in our landfills. Let's discuss why food waste is such a problem. First, overstocking. Food retailers operate under the assumption that consumers won't purchase produce and other fresh food if their shelves and displays look empty. As a result, grocery stores typically hold onto more food than they need, which inevitably spoils and is thrown into the landfill bin without ever being purchased. For similar reasons, when fresh food looks imperfect or ugly, agricultural manufacturers and grocery stores are inclined to throw out that perfectly edible food. Additionally, the lack of consistent, reliable food labels also leads consumers to prematurely throw out safe, edible food. Food labels can be confusing. Many presume that when the sell-by or best-by date has passed, food needs to be thrown out. However, these often do not accurately describe the true expiration date of your food, so use your best judgment. If it smells fine and looks fine, it should be safe to eat. The way we manufacture food also leads to significant waste. Over 99% of meat in the United States, for example, is produced at concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, also known as factory farms. In CAFOs, animals are kept indoors under strictly controlled conditions. In addition to the harm being done to these animals, factory farms require significant amounts of land and are responsible for 37% of methane emissions in the US. They also create dangerous waste that contaminates our most important water sources and causes health issues in local communities. Industrial agriculture also promotes the growth of monocultures to keep livestock fed, decreasing natural biodiversity in favor of planting one kind of crop. Campuses that utilize ornamental or non-native plants operate in this manner as well. These manufactured landscapes require more materials and maintenance than is necessary, including pesticides, fertilizers, and the depletion of natural resources. The great news is that food waste is a completely manageable problem, particularly at schools. Implementing offer versus serve methods during lunchtime allows students to decline certain food options, reducing food waste. Extending lunch periods and rescheduling lunch after recess also allows students more time to finish their meals to completion. Finally, implementing an excess food donation program, food share tables, and waste sorting programs at the end of lunch periods allows students to return uneaten and unopened food to combat food scarcity in their local communities. On a larger scale, campuses should also shift purchasing procedures and procurement requirements to focus on reducing waste. Procurement practices should consider packaging of materials and avoidance of single-use plastics. Investing in circular food economies, buying locally grown foods that have to travel shorter distances, and investing in composting and food waste diversion programs on site will help campuses combat food waste. Now that we know the sources of waste and where waste comes from, let's dive into waste's connection to climate change. One of the most influential ways that waste impacts our climate has to do with how we manage organic waste. Organic waste is any solid waste containing materials originating from living organisms like food scraps, yard trimmings, and paper products. When organic waste is disposed of in environments with little to no oxygen, such as a dump or a landfill, bacteria break it down through a process called methanogenesis. The byproducts of this process are methane and carbon dioxide, two climate superpollutants. Apart from water vapor, carbon dioxide is the most prominent greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, contributing the most to warming the climate over the past 200 years. CO2 can remain in our atmosphere for up to 1,000 years. Methane, in particular, absorbs and holds heat up to 80 times more efficiently than CO2. These two compounds are constantly released in their most potent forms into the atmosphere from improper waste disposal, which contributes to climate change exponentially. It is essential that local and global communities become educated on what belongs in each waste bin by using proper materials management practices. This collective action will propel climate mitigation and decrease the negative impacts of climate change. Another way to connect waste and the climate is to think about the life cycle of a typical item you may eventually throw in the trash. Plastic packaging, for example, is made out of crude oil, which is a fossil fuel. Plastics are produced in factories and facilities that also require fossil fuels to run. These plastic goods are then transported to stores and distribution centers in trucks, boats, and cargo planes that all also run on fossil fuels. For every additional item we consume, the cycle of extraction, production, and transportation begins again, requiring more natural resources and adding more and more emissions into the atmosphere.